Hey everyone, welcome to Anti-Natal News. So we are your hosts, Lawrence and Amanda. As usual, reporting on the news, both in the antenatal world, but also the world around us. And this is for everything that happened in April 2021. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter as always with at Anti-Natal News for daily updates. If you have any news that you think is relevant and you want to send in to us, then it's antinatalnews@gmail.com. Send in as much as you like, but please don't be upset if it doesn't get included. But yeah, let's go with this episode.
Okay, so let's get started with the anti-natal news of April 2021. First off, let's look at the new articles. For now, we're going to talk about all the new articles in English this month. There actually was only really one of substance for the most part. There were a lot of little articles that, maybe mentioned anti-natalism here and there, but were not of substance exactly. You can see a full list of all of those, little articles on the Antinatalism International website, link below to basically the news dump for the month of April on the website. Warbleton Council again released a stunning array of their translation of their article from a couple of months ago into a stunning array of different languages. So I always save those, even though it doesn't really bear much talking about within the episode. But the one that I did want to just mention briefly was an article called Generation Child Free, Not Having Children to Save the Planet, from aldiannews.com, probably saying that wrong. There's not much to say about this article. I was very pleased to see that while they didn't mention Antinatalism International, they did in fact embed David Benatar's video from our launch event on in the article, so that was nice to see. But yeah, it's it's a article about being child free, but it does touch on anti-natalism, sort of in relation to the COVID situation and all that. Definitely talks about David Benatar, Raphael Samuel to some extent. So always nice to see an article about the subject of anti-natalism. Go check it out, link below. Okay, so there were a couple of new academic papers this month. I will only be talking about the ones in English for now. So one of them was called Here's Not Looking at You, Kid, A New Defense of Anti-Natalism by Blake Hareth and Anthony Ferrucci. Interesting article. I do believe Mark J. Maharaj on the channel did a live stream going through it. So I will leave you in his very capable hands of seeing him read through that article and making further comments about it. Always great to see new academic papers on the subject of antinatalism. Unfortunately, academic papers on the subject don't surprisingly get the attention that they so richly deserve a lot of the time. Another one that came out this month is Kantian Approaches to Human Reproduction, Both Favorable and Unfavorable by L.F. Miller. I did not get a chance to read this one, unfortunately, so my apologies for not being able to comment on it further. However, it is available for you to read, link below.
Cool, and just quickly, the last sort of academic sort of thing that we wanted to comment on was that you may have seen that a new journal has actually been launched called the Journal of Controversial Ideas. It's headed by 3 people, and I forget the other 2, but Peter Singer is sort of like the big name behind it. And basically the thing that they want this journal to do is allow controversial ideas to be discussed, because I guess maybe many people from many different sort of political or whatever persuasions may have felt recently that there seems to be somewhat of a climate of, people who have controversial ideas are being censored or are self-censoring for many different reasons, whether that be peer pressure or, online mobs or the platforms themselves. So I think a lot of people from all sorts of different backgrounds, political persuasions, philosophical beliefs, maybe feel a bit, uneasy and honestly expressing their views. So the Journal of Controversial Ideas, what they hope to do is provide basically the same sort of level of academic, or the same academic level of, what any other journal would be, but they encourage people who have controversial ideas to submit articles, and the authors are allowed to anonymize it, or put a pseudonym or something like that. So obviously one of those ideas that I'm sure will get a lot of submissions on, or at least will be featured in it, is anti-natalism. I know David Benatar is, I think he's on the editorial board, and there's maybe some other, anti-natalists on there that maybe I'm just not aware of their work and stuff like that. But the first volume has been released. I haven't looked through the first volume, so I don't know exactly what's in it. But you can find it on their website, Journal of Controversial Ideas, and I'm sure they're going to release a lot of good stuff in the future.
Yes, thank you for that, Lauren. So sadly, I have not got a chance to read through this first edition of the Journal of Controversial Ideas. I have been told that antinatalism is covered in this first edition, at least in some part. Dr. Christopher Belshaw, I know, also has an article in this edition of the journal. Dr. Belshaw is not an antinatalist per se, but he has written on the subject of antinatalism in the past, and actually Mark J. Maharaj and I just released our interview with Dr. Belshaw on the latest episode of Antenatal News. So anyway, I very much look forward to exploring it further, and I think this is an amazing project and very important and much needed. So excellent. Okay, so moving on to the new antinatalist book news. So there are two books that apparently we missed last month that came out, new books on the subject of antinatalism. One is in Spanish. Now, I'm going to attempt to say the title of this, but it's probably not going to go over so well. Solo los mandos y los niños tienen hijos, Antinatalismo, Spanish edition by Ismael Leandri Vega. So I know very little about this work. I have purchased it, however. It is available on Amazon. Always wonderful. Goes without saying to see new books on the subject of antinatalism. I'm hoping that an English edition will be released at some point. I'm hoping that some antinatalists out there that speak Spanish maybe can purchase this book, can read it, and can let the rest of us know sort of what it's about and what's included. Very, very cool. Another new book on the subject of antinatalism that came out was called Prometheus Eagle, or How to Eliminate Human Suffering in the Most Civilized Way Possible. This is only available on Kindle, unfortunately. It's by Alonso Rodriguez. I have not got a chance to read this yet or look through it at all. I don't know anybody that's been able to check it out currently, but again, it's on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. Would be amazing, perhaps, to see a solid state printed edition at some point. But for now, go check it out. Looks very interesting. So for this month of April, two new books on the subject of antinatalism were released. Something called Divinity Extractor Fan by David C. McLean. I know very little about this. It is available on Amazon. There's more information about it on posthumanpoetry.blogspot.com, which I believe is the author's blog. And it is also available on lulu.com. So unfortunately, I don't have much more details about that. I think it is some sort of poetic work. It's not a philosophy book per se, but looks very, very interesting. Actually, all of the author's work looks very interesting, so I do plan on investigating further at some point. The last piece of antinatalist book news is that the great Miguel Steiner has released his second book on antinatalism. So he wrote a book on antinatalism many years ago in Spanish. It's quite a rare book, actually. I do have several copies because he was so kind to send me some. and some of those copies will be available as prizes for future things. Hint, hint, hint. But yes, so he's just released this new book called El Anti-Natalista. I do believe it is a work of fiction, which is always really, really cool to see. It is available on Amazon and a website called Editional.com. I actually ordered my copy from editorial.com. And I was contacted by the person that runs that site and was like, how did you make this order? This is only available to people in Spain. But then he sent me a copy through Amazon. So it all worked out. So I do have my copy. Unfortunately, I cannot read it because of the language barrier. But huge congratulations to Miguel Steiner. Always wonderful to see. Anti-natalists that have produced material in the past create new material, and I have a lot of respect for Miguel Steiner, and if you'd like to learn more about him, definitely go check him out on Facebook. In addition to that, I did interview Miguel Steiner on exploring anti-natalism, so highly recommend that interview, and go pick up the book, and if you do, let us know what you think. Okay, so moving on to anti-natalism video news. Now, a truly stunning, incredible number of videos about the subject of anti-natalism were made during the month of April this month. Really, really, really impressive amount of videos. It's funny how some months go by and you think, nothing really happened this last month, but to see the list is really kind of staggering. So, one example of a new video that did come out this month, I guess it does technically count as a podcast. I wasn't entirely sure where to put this, but was Sam Harris released a video called Special Episode Engineering the Apocalypse by Rob Reed and Sam Harris. I don't know anything about Rob Reed, unfortunately. Gotta be honest, I didn't actually get to listen to the entire episode. But within this episode, this Rob Reed does make a comment about antinatalism. He's sort of talking about like what the future of terrorism may look like, essentially, or what future extinction events are a possibility and who might be behind them. And so he makes sort of a comment about the possibility of antinatalism, or antinatalists specifically, like wanting to wipe people out with some sort of disease, which actually can't remember if he specifically says some sort of like disease that eliminates the ability to procreate, or whether he just means making people violently ill. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant by that. Just keeping it real, I have seen antinatalists once or twice in the past propose something like this, but it's not at all a common thought in the antinatalist community by any stretch of the imagination. I really don't think that even the most extinction-minded of us want people to die from being ill and horribly, because I can't quite see how that would be a peaceful extinction. So it was a bit of a flippant comment, to be perfectly honest with you. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Lawrence.
No, I was just gonna I listened to the whole thing, and I mean that comment about antinatalists, I would say it was probably mostly fueled by ignorance, but there is a grain of truth in there, which is that there are every community or every movement has its sort of wacky extremists that are going to go to or come up with these crazy ideas or whatever, and it's the responsibility of the rest of us to at least try and keep those people in check somewhat if we can. And I mean, like, obviously none of us would condone anything like that, and like the average antinatalist wouldn't either. So I do think he was being a bit misleading and mischaracterizing antinatalists generally, but at the end of the day, I can see where he was coming from, because there are extremists out there that will go to extreme lengths. I mean, hopefully they're not smart enough to come up with some sort of biological weapon or whatever, but as he details in the podcast, in the future these technologies may become accessible enough so that idiots can get their hands on them and use them. So I mean, it's a scary one, but I'm just glad it's not that, it's not common, but it does exist.
As far as I know, we've had 3 new antinatalist YouTubers appear for the first time this last month, so I'm going to shout them out now. Ryan McCarthy, Never Live Evil, I think is how you say that name. There are some brackets involved, so I don't exactly know how it's said. And Twaddlehood. So all very interesting YouTube channels. Highly recommend all 3 of them. Please go check them out. Please subscribe. And, as I always say, please go support your new antinatalist video creators. Okay, moving on to new podcasts. There actually were quite a number this month. One last month that we didn't get around to reporting on. Something called Dramacorosia. I believe this was in either Spanish or Portuguese. I really don't know. Looks fascinating, honestly. So one of the reasons I'm mentioning it is that I'm hoping that somebody that speaks the language that this podcast is in can tell us more about it. Links below to that. Yes, for this section, at least this time around, I am reporting on the new podcast in multiple languages. One particularly interesting podcast this month was by somebody called Jordan Myers, who is not somebody that I have ever been familiar with in the past. He has a podcast called Plato's Cave. This was episode 19, and it was featuring somebody by the name of Derek Lieben, I believe. And the subject was Pascal's Wager and Anti-natalism for AI. So this was an interesting conversation. Mark J. Maharaj, ? Did actually go through it all in a video on a live stream just a few days ago. So that was really cool too. I'll link to that as well. It was an interesting conversation on sort of whether to give birth or not to AI. And the usage of the term antinatalism in this context was a little strange. It came off a little clickbaity, to be perfectly honest with you. But the argument is that, like, the dangers of AI, the possible dangers of AI, might warrant not creating it. So the not creating of AI is basically saying, like, AI is the baby and it's not good to give birth to that baby, which it does propose a bit of a quandary, like applying the term antinatalism to the creation of ideas or other things. Like, it just seems a little strange to apply the term antinatalism to AI in this manner, but maybe it does make sense because it is a kind of consciousness. And so I don't know. There were others, certainly when Mark was reviewing this, that sort of felt the same way, that it was a little bit of a strange combination of terms and concepts. I'm not mad at it. I'm just saying it's a little bit of a question. Like, if I want to bake a cake, but I don't bake the cake, is that antinatalism? Like, I don't think so. So I don't know. There was also an episode on antinatalism on the show The Reality Check, the NPS podcast, Billy Whittle Network did an episode, something called Baby Bust, COVID-19 Lockdown Fails to Bring New Lives into This Awful, Terrible, Doomed World, an episode of The Philosophist, an episode of Beyond Talking Points, did a interesting episode on antinatalism and jury nullification. Not really sure what to say about that. There was also like a horrible, right-wing fucking racist podcast that did an episode on the subject of antinatalism called American National Radio Network White Wellness Antinatalist Neutering. I just think I'm bringing it up because I do kind of think it's important that antinatalists know that this kind of content is occasionally being produced around this subject. It's a little bit of like a should I bring attention to this or not kind of situation. At the same time, I just think it is kind of important that people know that it does occasionally happen. And with more frequency, I think can be argued in recent times. There were 2 new episodes of the Exploring Anti-Natalism podcast for you to check out. Mark and I released episode 32, which was an interview with Phil Torres. Really interesting episode. I do not believe this episode got nearly enough attention, to be perfectly honest with you. So please go check that out. We also did an interview. I did an interview with our fellow founder, Laith Malik Reem, which is a fantastic interview. Laith and I had horrific connection issues while trying to record the episode, and he basically just my knight in shining armor just took it upon himself to produce all these videos answering my questions on his own time, got them to me that day, and I was miraculously able to edit it in time, and it's a great interview. It's an incredible look at this very mysterious world of Arabic antinatalism. Laith is in many respects the voice of that, sort of like the window into that whole world. And it's fascinating. So definitely go check that out. It's a very unique look into this world that Laith is, very much our ambassador to. So I do believe that's it for podcasts this month. Nice to see so much activity. Go check it out. And the shows that happen to be in languages other than English, if somebody can let us know more details about them, I would be ever so grateful. So moving on to new anti-natalist music for the month of April 2021. Tons of news. Very happy to report. So new releases by Extinctionist Records. Big fan of Extinctionist Records. He's always releasing such cool stuff. There is a new Glistening album out, Glistening: The Art of Castrating Natalism. Full album 2021. Really, really good. So please go check that out. Please go support Extinctionist Records. He, in addition to the YouTube channel and his website, he has built this cottage industry basically around the production of anti-natalist black metal, and he creates tons of it, but he also signs bands that produce anti-natalist black metal in various countries. And so our next piece of news is actually one of these other anti-natalist bands that he has signed and is producing these cassette tapes for, and it's a band called Anti-Natalist. The album is called Celebration of Ruined Prosperity, and it's a new anti-natalist band from Iraq. He has released the full album on the Extinctionist Records YouTube channel, so you can go listen to it for free. But I highly recommend that people go buy the tape and support this band. I can't imagine what it must be like to produce anti-natalist black metal in Iraq. So thank you for your work, and it's fascinating. And thank you to Extinctionist Records for, making this music available to the rest of us. And congratulations to Anti-Natalist for the release of your first album. Another black metal-y kind of band by the name of Skogor did a song called Anti-Natalism. Really enjoyed it. Go check that out. Link below. Don't really have much else to say about it other than that. A band by the name of Hovert, who a couple of months ago released an album, a really great album, I think by the name of Ohm, if I'm not mistaken, available at Extinctionist Records on cassette, but also available in compact disc form. So they have released a video now with lyrics to, the songs that deal with anti-natalism. So that was really, really cool to see. Somebody by the name of Maddie Coco did a song actually in celebration of International Anti-Natalist Day this last month, which we'll talk about in a little while, called I'm Giving Up, Anti-Natalism song. This was kind of interesting because this is a channel that has about 30,000 subscribers. So, not very common to see such a large channel comment or make content at all about the subject of antinatalism. Really interesting track. I found the video very difficult to watch because it's a lot of flashing. So it got a bit difficult to sort of visually take in after a while, but really cool to see and just totally unexpected. I had never heard of this channel before this. So yeah, very, very interesting. There was some antinatalist sort of rap news. There was somebody called Anton Prakari who did like a rap song about antinatalism that I really liked, actually. There's also a new channel called Anti-Natalist Raps and More. I am just going to link to their channel below as opposed to like all the links to all the videos of all the songs. If I'm not mistaken, this is a new channel by somebody called Pro-Social Pessimist, I think is the name of the channel. I think it's him, because he used to also produce antinatalist music, and a lot of them were raps, and I'm pretty sure it's some of the same content. But yeah, really good. I mean, it's pretty high quality stuff. So go check out and subscribe to that channel. There were not one, not two, but three new pieces of antinatalist music out of Japan. So one of them was called Kotaro Hattori, Antinatalism. The second one, the title is in Japanese, so I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Google Translate could tell me, but I'm not entirely sure what it translates to. And the third one is partially in Japanese, but the part that it is in English is called "To Be Born Is Wrong" by Manabi Lemon. It's just very rare that you see three pieces of new antinatalism music related to, coming from Japan all in 1 month. So just thought I would put it here. But yeah, a lot of music for everybody to sample and check out in a lot of different styles. Have fun going and exploring the new antinatalist music for the month. Okay, so moving on to a piece of news that I did not expect to see at all. There was a new sort of antinatalist video game, believe it or not, produced this last month by a channel that's fairly new called Morality Without Addiction. Really interesting channel. We've talked about this channel just briefly in other episodes of the Antenatal News podcast. The game is called Better Never to Have Won, an antinatalism themed game. Now, sadly, I have not got to play this game, and the reason is because I can't get it to work on my browser. Regardless of that, I will keep trying. I do apologize that I can't, really detail what it is and what it's about and give you more information about it. I would love to perhaps see some videos of people playing it. This is, I think, the third instance of somebody having produced a game with an antinatalist theme. I think this is the first time that Morality Without Addiction has produced one, but it is the third instance of a game that's used this subject anyway, as far as I know, as far as I can remember. But yeah, really cool to see. I mean, it looks really highly produced. Cosmic Slam and Karima Kerma provide music for it, so that's awesome. And yeah, I hope to be able to play it. I will continue to fiddle around with it and hopefully get somewhere at some point. Okay, so there were 4 events announced this last month, some of which have already happened, but we'll go through each of them individually. So the first one I want to talk about briefly is the 4th International Conference on Philosophy and Meaning of Life. It's a call for papers, but there will be online presentations as part of this. The submission deadline is October 1st, 2021, and the conference date is January 17th, 2022 through January 19th, 2022. This will be an online event. I do not believe there will be any kind of, in-person iteration of the event at any point. I will quickly just sort of read a bit of their abstract about what this is. The aim of the conference is to address these fundamental questions from a wide range of philosophical perspectives, including both Western and non-Western traditions. Potential topics could include, but are not limited to, theoretical theoretical approaches to meaning in/of life, the relationship between death and meaning, antinatalism and nihilism, procreation and extinction, spiritual, religious, and psychological implications of meaning, linguistics, metaphysical and epistemological issues concerning meaning in applied ethics, such as bioethics, environmental ethics, and transhumanism, the role of narrative, identity, and agency, comparative accounts of meaning in religio-philosophical traditions around the world, implications of meaning for health, well-being, or virtue. So, sounds absolutely fascinating. The venue with which this is all sort of being compiled for is the Department of Philosophy, University of Pretoria, South Africa. So, yes, if you are somebody that is interested in submitting to this, I highly recommend that you do. It looks incredible, and I'm very excited to learning some more information about it. Next event has not happened yet, but was announced just at the very end of this last month. It is discussing antinatalism and Christianity with Dr. David Benatar, University of Cape Town, and Dr. Matthew Lee Anderson, Baylor University. This will take place on Monday, June 7th, 2021. I'm going to read a little bit of the abstract. We tend to think that bringing children into the world is a good thing, something to be celebrated, in fact. This assumption is challenged by anti-natalism, an ethical stance which is increasingly popular. Anti-natalists argue that procreation is in itself morally wrong and should therefore be abandoned. A key voice in this debate is Professor David Benatar, whose book Better Never to Have Been advances the idea that coming into existence is always a serious harm. In this moot point event, Professor Benatar will interact with Christian ethicist Dr. Matthew Lee Anderson, discussing the arguments for and against antinatalism and whether and how the Christian faith addresses this most profound of human questions, whether we should continue to exist. A live Q&A session will follow the main discussion. So yeah, that's really exciting. I have not yet registered for this event. I believe you must register if you want to, see the I don't know what participation in that Q&A looks like, or whether you have to submit questions ahead of time. I don't know any of those details yet, but I expect that there will be updates about this, and when there are, I will report on them in future episodes of the Antinatalist News podcast. So keep a lookout for that. Register as early as you can ahead of time, and yes, I think this is a very important conversation, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. So the next event, sadly, already happened. I did not get to participate in it or watch it or anything like that. I don't know if it was recorded. I found out about this on Masahiro Morioka's Twitter account, and it was apparently a seminar about his book. So I'll read a little bit of what he wrote. This is just sort of translated from his Japanese Twitter tweet. At tomorrow's niche seminar online, my book, Should I Not Have Been Born, will be held. Masahiro Morioka, Is It Better Not to Be Born to the Philosophy of Life? And then there are a bunch of names. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information about this. I have no idea how it went. I did not get a chance to communicate with Masahiro about it before the recording of this podcast. I hope it went great. And yeah, I will, if there is a recording of it somewhere, or there is a possibility of doing an update on it soon, then I will definitely do that next month. So very cool. The last event I wanted to speak about briefly in relation to April 2021 was April 9th was International Anti-Natalist Day. So it was a lot of fun. A lot of people made videos. There was a lot of activity on Twitter. It got a lot of activity on Reddit and various places. There are actually 3 antinatalism related holidays. There's this one, which is April 9th, and then there's one in June, I think it's June 17th, if I'm not mistaken, which is the invention of the Advocacy of Anti-Procreation, which, believe it or not, is actually a Chicago-based antinatalist group that I have never met, but I did interview them for the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. Yeah, and there's also Child Free Day, which I forget, I think it's in August, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so anyway, it was a lot of fun. Don't really know what else to say about it. Don't know if it'll happen again next year. We'll see. Okay, so moving on to the work of some of the other antinatalist groups that are active. So just a couple of months ago, if not last month, I'm actually completely blanking, but a new group by the name of Stop Having Kids, or stophavingkids.org, burst onto the scene. Nobody expected them to show up. It was such a nice surprise, and they've just been kicking ass. I love seeing what they're doing. So they are, if I'm not mistaken, a Seattle-based group, and they're doing a lot of street activism, for one thing. I think that's like, one of the biggest hallmarks of what they're doing. Of course, there is the website, which I highly suggest people go check out. But the street activism that they're doing is amazing. So they're standing on street corners and stuff with signs, and for the most part, getting some great reactions from people. And they've been filming a lot of these great reactions. There was one in particular that I saw. It was a German woman, or German-born woman who's lived in America, a long, long time, who was so happy and to see what they were doing, and made a comment like, "This is the most positive thing I've ever seen out here." And just the elation, in her voice and her mannerisms in relation to them was like so encouraging to see. And I'm glad that they're getting that kind of reaction. And, they're just some of the videos that are coming out of these public, demonstrations are great. And I see absolute potential for some sort of documentary. I hope that's in part, part of their thinking of filming these things. So huge props to Stop Having Kids. Go check out their store. I actually got one of their t-shirts and a bunch of bumper stickers. Some of the bumper stickers I will be giving away with various things in the future. They're selling their signs. I think there's some kind of sale going on right now. They also have another campaign going on right now of writing the words "Stop Having Kids" on currency. I don't know if that's legal, to be perfectly honest with you. I honestly have no idea. I've never done anything like that, but apparently it's kind of catching on. I mean, people really like it as an idea. So they're just coming up with all kinds of interesting ways of getting people involved, and seem to be having quite a bit of success so far. So mad props to them. And yeah, I just am very excited to see what the development of Stop Having Kids is going to look like. We are going to be interviewing them for Exploring Antinatalism in the near future. And yeah, congratulations to them. Quick little bit of child-free news. So just a tiny little bit of news on the 2021 Child-Free Conference, which is upcoming. It's going to happen in July 31st, 2021. A lot of the speakers have been announced. So links below to where you can see more about who is going to be speaking at the event. Make sure to register. And yeah, I really am looking forward to this. I don't really know what to expect for the most part, but it's a great initiative, and I'm just happy to see that they're doing it. So, tiniest little bit of anti-natalism news from Indonesia, which, hey, I don't think I've ever seen actual anti-natal news come out of Indonesia, which is really, really cool. There was an article about the subject of anti-natalism that came out of Indonesia this last month. I don't have any information about it, but I definitely wanted to bring some attention to it. If somebody would like to do a translation, perhaps, or like to give us some information about what's said in this article, please let us know. Please leave a comment below and tell us what you can about it. Really, really cool to see. Moving on to a bit of news of antinatalism in either the language of Spanish or Portuguese. So there was a couple of things this month. You can find out all of the various things on the website in the news dump this month for April. The one thing that I am going to comment on is a new Julio Cabrera documentary was released. And didn't get any attention, which I am flabbergasted by. So it's called The Form of the World, and it's a documentary about Julio Cabrera, one of the most beloved antinatalists in the world. So I don't know why people aren't like losing their shit over this. I don't even agree with Julio Cabrera, and I was losing my mind over it. I think it's so cool. I'm so excited for him. In addition to being a hardcore anti-natalist and a philosopher, he's also a film critic and sort of expert. And so, I'm excited for him. It's great that, he has his own documentary now. So please go check it out. There are English subtitles. And it's really, really good. In some respects, the interview or the video that we produced with him on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast is also sort of another documentary into his worldview. So if you'd like sort of a sequel of sorts, there's that. But it's just wonderful to see Julio Cabrera finally getting his own documentary. I will have to put information about it on the movies section of the ANI website. I'll get around to doing that ASAP. Okay, so a little bit of news from both Poland and Japan. Interestingly enough, there was not a ton of news from these countries this month, which is the first time in a while. Both of them have just been chucking it out, in recent months. Tons of news has been coming out of Poland and Japan in recent months. So in Poland, there were 2 articles about the subject of antinatalism. I really can't tell you anything about either of them, unfortunately. But if you have any information about them, I would love it if you could let us know in the comments. Links below to those. That's pretty much it. There might be a couple of other little things which you could find on the website, but that's all. So we're just going to move directly on to Japan. There were a whole bunch of YouTube videos from Japanese YouTubers this last month. I'm not going to speak about any of them really just because they're all in Japanese and there's not really much I can say, but you can find a list of them on the ANI website. There is a new book that in part at least covers the subject of antinatalism. A random Japanese YouTuber did sort of a review of it. And I asked Masahiro Morioka if he could tell me anything about it. So I'm just going to quickly read what he says. The guy on that Japanese YouTube channel talks about the book Self-Enlightenment in the Darkness, published this year, which includes a chapter on antinatalism. I have read that chapter. There, the authors have a dialogue about Benatar's argument and antinatalism in other pop cultures like True Detectives. Their dialogue is interesting and provide us a lot of information about literatures, and the context is not a new one, I think. Other topics that they talk about are the dark web, the deep state, etc. So interesting. There is no English edition as far as I know, so if you happen to speak Japanese, there's this new book out there with a chapter on antinatalism, and if Masahiro likes it, it must be pretty good, because I trust his opinion. So go check that out. Links below if you want to see what that new book is. Masahiro Morioka is working on all kinds of stuff. A lot of news on the way that I can't really talk about, but I definitely expect to have a big, Masahiro Morioka update in the next episode of the Antinatal News podcast. The last little piece of antinatalist news, sort of from Japan, but sort of not really, of Japanese origins, but produced in other places, is just a little bit of antinatalist anime news, which is interesting. We're seeing more and more of this. I mean, last month there was like a ton of Japanese or of antinatalist anime news. There's only a little bit this time around, and it's 2 separate videos talking about this character, Zeke Yeager, from the anime Attack on Titan, who apparently is an antinatalist. I don't know much about Attack on Titan. It's kind of funny because the YouTuber and my dear friend, Gray Tai Cho, who is very well known in this community for producing these like gorgeous, compilation videos of like things in Mendham has said, matched to pieces of video, and just produces these incredible videos that are very popular and very well known in this community. He made a video years ago called Goliath, which uses footage from Attack on Titan. So it's like, I have seen the subject connected to Attack on Titan in the past, but it's just really interesting that now Attack on Titan is like, literally has an antinatalist character in it. So it's just kind of funny the way the world works out sometimes. Yeah, so these were very interesting videos. I don't really know what else to say about them, but I'm just excited to see the subject come up in the forms of popular media more. I think that has a greater effect in introducing these ideas than a lot of other methods that we may prefer. Like, it'd be really great if people were reading the books. It'd be really great if people were reading the articles. But these introductions to the subject through popular media, through music, through anime, through things like this, I think that has an incredible effect. So it's very exciting to see. It has made me want to watch Attack on Titan. So I may actually do that in the near future, at least these episodes. But yeah, please go check these out. It's just interesting. There is sort of a little cottage industry of people talking about the philosophy in various animes. Like Death Note has like tons of videos on it about talking about the philosophy within that manga and anime. So maybe we can expect to see more of this in relation to anti-natalism and various YouTube channels producing content on the philosophy of this anime and others. So we'll see. Okay, well, we've had a decently busy month at Antinatalism International this last month of April. This month we did a sort of a soft release of the animal database, which is one of our biggest initiatives, actually. It's an attempt to build an international global database of veterinary practitioners, activists, animal welfare peoples of all kinds that are able to perform certain services to their communities, wherever they may be, specifically that of sterilization, abortion, and euthanasia. So this project is not out yet. The database is not assembled and available on the website just yet. It is sort of being bottom-lined by our fellow founder, Tejas. But for now, what we've done is I released a video on the YouTube channel. We've sort of put our feelers out on social media and various places because we really cannot build this thing without your help. So no matter where in the world you are, if you know of animal welfare practitioners of any kind that perform these services legally, obviously, that have, businesses that, do these sorts of procedures and run these sort of services for animals, we really would love it if you'd contact us at info@antinatalisminternational.com and let us know about them, because we'd love to add them to the database. And what we hope is that, this will serve as a really easy and useful way for people to search for services that are much needed for animals within their care. Serve is a great way to be able to find help, basically, for animals in your area with these specific needs. So once again, we really cannot build this thing without your help. If you'd like to submit to the animal database, please contact us at info@antinatalisminternational.com. And a lot more about this project on the way.
There's also been a lot going on the handbook front. So as usual, Laith and I have been uploading videos to the Annie YouTube channel, video versions of the handbook. They're in English and Arabic, so definitely check those out. And there's also been some translations of the handbook as well, the handbook itself. So this month we've had Spanish first edition being released, simplified Chinese second version, Italian second version, and a first edition of Italian and French. So that's quite a lot in this month. Hopefully we'll have more next month as well. If you do want to help with any translations, either video or the actual text handbook, then please just send me an email at lawrence@antinatalisminternational.com.
Yeah, I want to say my personal thanks to everybody that's been helping with translations and helping Laith and Lawrence with the handbook project. It's amazing. It's incredible to see. So in other news, Lawrence, you've had a very busy month doing all kinds of videos and this and that. So I wanted to maybe ask you a little bit about that. I think it may be a good place to begin is the longer version of your appearance on Channel 4 came out this month on the Channel 4 YouTube channel in the Would You Rather Have Kids or No Kids series. And, from what you've said in the past, this was a 2-hour conversation initially, but they've generously upped the 3-minute version to like a 5-minute version. So there is some more in there. What did you think about the longer version and how it turned out?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't think the longer version really added much. They didn't really add anything new that we said into it. It was more like the same stuff that we'd said in the 3-minute version. Just they included like whole sentences rather than editing the sentences in half or whatever. So I don't think it was like a massive addition, but I guess it's better than the 3 minutes. One sort of key thing that did change for the 5-minute one, although they didn't really make it that clear, is that in the first one that was released, 3-minute video, it did look like at the start that I was being like quite aggressive towards this lady, which I wasn't at all. They just edited it to make it look like that. And then in the 5-minute video, they did kind of show that I wasn't being that, because they showed the context of what I was saying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know, if you watch it, you can kind of tell how they don't really clear it up that much, but they do kind of include the whole thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a huge shame that they can't just like release the unedited or like a much longer version. It'd be really wonderful to see like that full conversation. And it's just a shame that this is sort of the way reality TV works. I mean, I had a similar situation when I was on Tosh.0. I basically had a 2-hour conversation with Daniel Tosh, but and it got edited down to 4 minutes, and there's just nothing you can do about it. 10 minutes worth of sentences becomes, one sentence somehow, and it's disappointing. But you did a video with Mark clarifying it. Do you want to speak about that a little bit?
So Mark and I, that's like on YouTube, question mark, he hosted me for sort of like a reaction or discussion video based on it, so we did that as well. And the other thing that Mark hosted me for was the reaction to that vegan lawyer conversation as well.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, those were like quite long videos, because I had a discussion with that vegan lawyer on her channel, and then Mark hosted me to do a reaction video on his channel.
Yeah.
And then off the back of that vegan lawyer conversation, I had a conversation, / I don't even know what it was, with Avi and Ask Yourself, Isaac. And it was recorded, but apparently like there was some technical issues or something, so they don't actually really have the recording to release, so it's not going to be made public.
Such a shame.
I mean, I don't know if anyone listening to this saw that discussion with them live, because I guess that's the only way people will have seen it. But I mean, they just operate very differently to me. Like, I am not at all sort of au fait with formal logic and stuff like this. So in preparation for it, I had help from someone, but like just going into it, I was just like not equipped with, like, I basically just don't speak the same language that they do. Yeah, so I was just in sort of like a complete foreign environment, so I did not come out on top. And I mean, you can make all the excuses in the world, but yeah.
Well, I mean, what you were trying to do was very difficult. I mean, from what Mark was able to find out on Twitter, I think through Ask Yourself, was that, the first hour was recorded, and then there were technical difficulties, and I guess he doesn't want to release like an incomplete conversation, which I sort of understand, but it is a shame. I unfortunately was not able to make it, so I did not get to see it in person. I have no doubt you did better than you think you did. Regardless of how it went, though, and the existence or non-existence of the video itself, you did do some amazing prep work, and actually, like, on the Anti-Natalism International Discord, it was really it was kind of a fun couple of days, because people were like trying to assemble these syllogisms, and it was a lot of really interesting back and forth, and I enjoyed watching that happen. And so, if nothing else, I think I don't really think there's ever been an attempt to create an anti-natalist syllogism or a syllogism on anti-natalism. So, at the very least, I think some important work came out of this conversation, and that's great.
Also, in terms of the Channel 4 appearance, a guy who I forget his actual name, but I think his second name is Meta. Also, in terms of the Channel 4 stuff, there was a YouTube channel called Metaethics that did a response as well. And yeah, I don't really have anything to say on the response. I mean, I thought it was quite nice. And yeah, he seems like a nice guy. But yeah, if people want to check it out, that's on yeah, Metaethics, MEHTA, and then ethics channel.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for the Antinatalism International news this month. We have a lot cooking in the background. There is one like big thing that is almost done that I wish I could announce in this episode of Antinatal News, but you know, something to look forward to. And yeah, a lot on the way, but not now. So moving on.
So now we're just going to cover a bit of like what's been, you know, happening in the sort of wider world, but is still relevant. For this section, we only really have like 2 articles really this month. The first one came out in Vox, and it was written by I don't really know who the person is, but they claim to be a climate scientist. And they talk about they sort of base the article off a study which was co-authored by a lady called Kimberly Nicholas that looks into the ways that people can reduce their environmental impact. And one of the ways that they state in this is by reducing the number of kids you have. And the author kind of takes exception to this suggestion, and you know, they have the view that you should continue to have kids if you want them. The bulk of the article is really taken up by a transcript from a podcast that the author of the article did with this researcher, Kimberly Nicholas, you know, asking her about the study and the conclusion that, you know, it would be good for people to reduce the amount of kids they have. And obviously I won't go into it all because people can look up the article and read it for themselves. But it seems like the main point of contention, at least for the author of the article, is that they don't think people should reduce the number of kids they have, because it actually isn't individual people that are really the problem. It's kind of like the system, and individual people can only do so much, can only have so much impact. But if they're working within a system that is so environmentally taxing and inefficient and ineffective, then it's really less about individual change and more about systemic change. Now, my personal feelings on this are, you know, even if you just push aside the whole idea of having kids for a moment, I think it's a relatively valid critique. Often on an issue by issue basis, you kind of have to weigh up whether the onus lies more on systemic change or individual change. With the environment, I think it's very valid to think that, you know, there are some systemic changes that need to be made rather than individual, although I think individuals should still make any reasonable changes that they can. But when you bring in the whole idea of procreation, this whole idea of like systemic change vs individual change really misses the point of like the ethics of procreation, because essentially what this climate scientist is saying is, I see the children, or the potential people that are going to be created, as mere digits of CO2 or water consumption. And given that my individual actions will not have a large impact on the grand scheme of things, it's fine if I increase or just don't decrease my environmental impact, i.e. by reducing the amount of kids I have. Because I just see my kids as these sort of numbers, and it's fine for me to have to rack up that environmental impact, because it's really the system that is the problem. The person who wrote this article is really not thinking of the issue from the point of view of the actual individuals involved. They're thinking of it merely as their own environmental impact. They don't give a shit about the actual kids, or at least they don't show any sign of caring at all, what the impact would be on them. I don't know. I just thought, like, the person who wrote this article, I mean, it's from Vox, so I wasn't expecting, okay, I won't take a dig at Vox because it's not Vox's fault. But anyway, I don't know. I just felt like the person who wrote this article just had a really shallow analysis of the situation and just didn't take into account at all the concerns of the actual individuals that are going to be impacted by this decision. Just thinking about their own sort of, digits and environmental impact. Yeah, so basically then there was a New York Times article which pissed me off even more. So this article, it sort of sets the scene by talking about the pandemic and how, at the start of the pandemic, there were some people making predictions that there was going to be this whole baby boom, but it looks more like what is being referred to as a baby bust. So, there's been a slump in birth rates, especially in Europe and America. Or North America, should I say. And the author of the article says this is like in part due to young people being concerned about their own futures and the future of the species in general. So they sort of see it as cruel to bring a new life into the world when they are even in question about their own future. And the Cathars, Arthur Schopenhauer and David Benatar all get a sort of name mention. And another consideration that the author talks about is that a lot of people, because of environmental concerns, are also erring on the side of having less or no kids. And this is really the way that the author sets the scene, and then sort of halfway through the article talks about how they themselves, with their, I don't know, wife or girlfriend or just partner, become pregnant. And the author is now musing over all of these things because, at first it was this sort of abstract philosophical thing, whereas now they're actually in a situation where, if they stay on their current path, are going to bring a new person into the world. So the author kind of says that the author says they're a philosopher, although I think, isn't there a famous sort of thing of like, you can only become a philosopher when other people call you one. So I don't know, maybe it's a bit arrogant for the author to give themselves that title, but whatever. But anyway, so the author kind of philosophizes on the question and really talks about, was saying that they were kind of agreeing with the concerns that people had, but then there were two quotes by Franz Kafka that kind of swung it for the author. And I'm not going to read out the quotes, like you can see them in the article. But honestly, I don't mean to be rude, but honestly, the take that this author had at the end of the article was the dumbest fucking take I've ever heard. Like, oh dear. Like the article was going okay, and then it just went so downhill. I mean, talk about a slump or a bust. But basically, I'll read out a quote from the article. So it says, so this is the author basically saying why they now choose to bring another child into existence. And one thing I just wanted to say is, whilst I was reading the article in the background, like the author, yeah, they can philosophize all about it they want, but like their partner is already pregnant, so it's kind of up to their partner whether the kid comes into the world or not. Like you can philosophize about it all you want and talk about hope all you want, but you've already put your partner in the position where they are the one that's going to have to make the decision. So yeah, I was just saying, like, that was always in the back of my mind. It was like, okay, you can philosophize about this stuff and come to your conclusions, but you probably should have done that before you put your dick in someone. Anyway, so the quote from the article is, what if hope exists not for any individual human being now living, but rather for the members of future generations who, though powerless to redeem us, might nevertheless be able to overturn the injustices we have been subject to and carve out a better existence for themselves. Now, this is so deluded, I feel, on so many levels. I just feel like anytime anyone appeals to hope, I just feel like it's this vague get out clause that people use. Like, what do they mean? Hope for what? Like, you're just needlessly bringing new generations into the world to do what? Like, what what do you mean hope for them to do what? They didn't need to do anything. Like, you just created them out of nothing, and now you're using this vague word to justify what you've done. And then there was another part of the article, and I mean, maybe people think my analysis is just really biased to the article, but like, I mean, I'm not a professional commentator, so like, you know, please take whatever I say with a grain of salt. Read the article yourself. But honestly, I just like really didn't like it. Then another quote. So the world might well be a terrible place, but by having a child, you are introducing something new into it. Of course, this is a sort of gamble with reality. You don't know yet who your child might be, but if you dare to do it, to bring something new into the world, we might hit upon the right path, and then things really could conceivably get better. So that's a quote from the article. Again, vague nonsense. The world might well be a terrible place. I mean, it is. But by having a child, you're introducing something new into it. Yeah, why do that? And what do you mean something new into it? You're someone new into it. So I just feel like the author is so dehumanizing their own future child even before they're born, to justify their own delusions. And then, like, check this out. Of course, this is a sort of gamble with reality. It's not a gamble with reality. It's a gamble with another person that you're about to create. Like, don't try dehumanize your own future child so that you can get away with what you're doing. Like, I just think it's so disgusting. And I mean, maybe it's all subconscious, but I mean, how do you get to the level where you're writing New York Times articles and you're just letting this stuff slide in your thinking? And like, I'm not saying I'm the most sort of clean, powerful thinker ever, but I'm not writing fucking New York Times articles. Anyway, one last bit. So he then says, stuff along the line of, it isn't just, basically, at the end, the author sort of assumes a criticism that may be launched his way, which is like, you're just offloading your problems onto another generation while you get the sort of high of creating someone new. But the author just says like, oh, well, these things can be overcome, and then just doesn't say how. Just one line, these things can be overcome. And it's like, what do you mean by that? Like, you're literally creating whole new people and putting them into the world that you say might well be terrible, and all you can come up with is, oh, well, it can be overcome. So I don't know. And then a final quote from the article is, I am happy enough at any rate with the gamble Eddie, which is his partner, and I took. We have a wonderful boy. Like, talk about delusion. Like, he's happy with the gamble he took with his wonderful boy. Like, what if your wonderful boy turned out to be born with a genetic disease or got bone cancer really young? Like, yeah, I bet you'd be fucking happy then, wouldn't you? It's just so irresponsible.
100% agree with everything you said. This is a little bit of its own phenomenon, where people that either have a bun in the oven, or are thinking about having a kid, or have just had a child, will make content about antinatalism. And I don't understand. I really should compile some examples of this, because I've seen it happen several times, where either somebody will make a video series where they're in that sort of position, or they'll propose to do some massive antinatalist project or something like that, or anti-antinatalist project, sort of in preparation or in reaction to just having procreated or getting ready to procreate or something. And I don't know what that is. It almost seems like almost a strange kind of confessional kind of thing. Like, you say your sins and then you're cleansed of all like culpability or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the psychology behind it is, but it seems like a weird way of trying to like put it out into the ether as a way of like getting, not forgiveness per se, I mean, because it's much more glib than that, right? Just all of these sort of justifications. And there is something that is a little evil about that. Like, I'm sorry to use that word, but there is something particularly nasty about being exposed to antinatalist thinking and doing it anyway. like one of the biggest examples I can think of like this is Antinatalism. So for those of you that don't know who Antinatalism is, he is actually the person that will come up as the face of David Benatar most often when you Google David Benatar. It's actually a picture of Antinatalism, who was this YouTuber that used to argue with various people, most specifically in Mendham back in the old days. And during the course of his massive 100-video Why I'm Not an Anti-Natalist series, which was just this epic, vomiting up of anti-natalism, he got his wife pregnant and was making videos about, basically justifying it. And I don't say this with any kind of like, I got you kind of attitude behind it, or it doesn't make me happy at all or anything like that. But you have to wonder about the children of people that make these statements, 20 years from now, 15 years from now, 30 years from now, or whatever it might be, finding these articles, finding these videos. And it's like, you watch this stuff and you hope that those children affected will have the happiest life possible. But it's like, what if they don't? And then they're going to find these statements from their parents so aggressively, glibly justifying their actions in the face of the argument for the fail-safe. Don't take the chance. Don't take the risk. People telling them not to, people giving them good reasons not to. So it's like, are we going to see instances of that, later on down the road, where the children of some of these people have their own comments to make about their foolish parents' decisions that were made for them, and sort of like kind of psychological deadness around the subject that their progenitors have displayed, in these pieces of either articles or videos. And I think about that a lot, to tell you the truth. And so this is just another example of that. And I don't really know why people find it acceptable to do this, because in a weird way, it's kind of an extra piece of child abuse.
Yeah, like I was thinking while I was reading the article, like, what if your quote unquote wonderful boy, which I'm sure, like, hopefully will grow up to be a nice person and have a happy life, hopefully. But yeah, what if he doesn't? What if he grows up and he has an awful life, and then he reads this article and just sees his father, just whimsically, what is that word?
Whimsically?
Yeah, just sort of whimsically sort of saying, yeah, fuck it, I'm hopeful, so I'll just put someone else into this, gamble of a reality.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so callous.
Yeah, it is. And I think as antinatalism continues to grow, as it continues to be a more well-known idea in the world, I think that it's not insane to say that this is an idea that will affect whatever the modern family is going to be. I just don't think that parents can expect in the future for children not to grow up posing these questions later on about their decision. I just think that is going to be a more common thing. It might not be an outrageously common thing, but I think it's reasonable to expect that it's going to happen more and more. So I don't know if there are any, natalists or future natalists that listen to this podcast, like, not only think more about what you're doing, but like think about the material that you're putting out about this subject and the effect that it might have on your future progeny. Because this is just sort of an extra nastiness, I think, to do to your child.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Anti-Natal News. We're always looking for more news, so please do send us some if you've got any at antinatalnews@gmail.com. Special thanks to Anugra for the logo and AK Hunter for our theme music. Podcast episodes will always be available on the Anti-Natalism International YouTube channel, and you can also catch them on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. And of course, always remember you can always contact us on Twitter at Antinatal News. Thank you so much, and see you next month.